Hello and welcome. You're watching the NHRD Summit on HR Shared Services and Technology on ET Now. Now, we all know that HR Shared Services is not a new concept, but it is in fact a relatively lesser known concept in India. Over the next half an hour, we will take you through the summit where panelists, delegates and HR representatives from across the country discussed the importance of the same. Take a look at the illustrious inaugural session of the 3rd NHRDN Summit.
4 or 5 years ago, there was not even a single program in India which was around shared services, not even one. So the first program in India happened 3 or 4 years ago. Before that, there was no such program. Typically, the market size was almost negligible. There were hardly any service providers who were giving HR shared services, related services, or were even talking about it. If you remember, the total market size was negligible. Today, when we look at, there is a program happening which is the 3rd edition. There are about 200 people. There are 25 speakers which are coming from all over the country, who's who in this field. And at that time, it was considered a very transactional work or transactional role. And today, if you look at it, has become a part of the HR's strategic agenda. Any HR transformation which is taken up in India, it is very unlikely that shared services or HR technology will not be a part of it. Best part of this program, and we were again discussing that, we get here a lot of people who are not the CHROs per se, but who are making CHROs successful. So you are the operating heads who are generally not visible. So this is the conference to celebrate people who make HR heads celebrate. So it is great to have each one of you in this audience, and I hope you will enjoy the program. And without taking further much time, and I'm going to request our first speaker, or I should say the keynote, Nathan, to please come here and share his views, and then I'm going to request the next speakers. So over to you, Nathan. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. Thank you. Thank you so much.
The demands that are being placed on human resources is very different from the ones that we have seen in the past. New businesses are coming in. We are looking at older businesses are getting far more complex. Today's technology has turned the world completely upside down. And in all this, don't forget that India is being seen as an ocean of talent. And every organization from outside the world, global organizations, are all making a beeline here to India. And there's an expectation. But I'm just going to leave you with this thought. As much as we talk about the transformation that is happening in organizations, ask yourselves, what transformation is going on within you? How can we be better professionals? How can we tell a story? A story that is so compelling that the person who comes up and says, I see what you do. All the fuzziness of the past is given birth to data-driven analytics, and you can say this is exactly what we are doing. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to request Rajiv to go next, and I call it the purist view. You've heard a practitioner, you will hear an academician, but in between the purist view, the way they look at the market, the way they look at the modeling of shared services and learnings. So over to you, Rajiv. Thank you.
While people have, while there are trends of having, standalone HR shared services, but these are moving into integrated shared services. So people are finding that, so you initially probably had the HR somewhere separately, you had the finance somewhere separately, but then there were certain functions or certain, processes which required, a handshake and a, kind of a interaction between the two, and you found it easier to, bring them together. So that's something which is happening. There are also several work which is high value, and of course I think this is a hackneyed theme about HR analytics and so on which is happening, but I think it's going a little beyond that, and the kind of capabilities which are required in this, the kind of profile of people who are joining the shared services, that is really changing quite a lot. And even if you look at things like reporting, where does it report to, where does the shared services report to, it no longer goes into maybe a mid-tier leader in the firm, but it's going right up to the top, and that is indicative of what is going on in some of these shared services. So I think with that, we come to the end of this, and I'll hand over the baton to Pankaj for the next speakers and so on. Thank you very, very much. Thanks.
Now I'm going to go to the teacher, the guru, and Dr. Jitendra, and I would love to hear, and we all, your views on this subject. So over to you, Dr. Das. Thank you.
Now, when I looked at this shared services, because I was here last year also, you need to do a lot of research to figure out what this is all about. And what struck me in the beginning was that the moment you talk of this as a shared service, the fundamental meaning of this is that there is some function which is shared across different units in the organization. The shared services was actually first quoted in a HR book titled HR Champions by an author called Ulrich. And in that, he did talk of a lot of futuristic things as to how the HR function will change, and then that's how I started picking up things from there. So whenever you talk of a centralization and in a way shared services, which will come to now, there's a why it was being done. Now, typically, these were done by the corporates. The corporates have one fundamental objective, to cut costs and maximize profit. So when you do these kinds of things, the costs were being reduced. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Das. And we have amidst us Rajesh Ranjan, who's the partner and the global head for their business services vertical. He's specially flown in for this event here, so thank you very much, Rajesh. I request you to please join us here.
While the global HR outsourcing market is around $30 billion, roughly 10% is Asia Pacific. When we look at the growth numbers, the growth numbers in Asia Pacific is double of what we are seeing globally. More importantly, if you peel the onion and look at the emerging markets within APAC, that number goes up by 4 times, 5 times, right? So clearly there's a significant growth that is taking place in terms of how organizations are using HR outsourcing as a way to manage and deliver better HR services and, quite frankly, respond to business needs. The driver behind this adoption is quite different. So while in the West, you will see HR outsourcing as a primary tool to reduce cost, in Asia Pacific, and more importantly, again, in the emerging market, we saw that as a tool to create a more agile and scalable HR delivery model, which can respond to the business demands quickly, and at the same time, improve, engage employee experience. So of course, in the Western model, since it was kind of based on cost reduction, so there are a lot of SLAs and KPIs which are based on efficiency metrics. But in the emerging markets, what we are seeing is, clearly it is also, again, some of those things are being tracked, but a lot of emphasis is being given on what we call the business outcome.
I'm going to hand over the mic for the last part, which is the word of thanks to our Director General Kamal Singh, who's conceptualized this program. So over to you, Kamal.
This is the new concept that is catching up in India. Globally, it has already caught up, and it is being viewed as one of the key differentiator or game changer as we move on to compete globally. With that thought, we had brought this entire design and summit, the way it has been put together. You see the best of the best speaker, the best of the best practitioner who have done it and who have really made it a differentiator in their own companies. I can say with pride, Mr. Rajesh Tripathi, and you will see as you move on, this concept will further grow as we progress. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank each one of you for taking time out to really make the best out of the offering that NHRD has given you. And it is your presence and participation that tomorrow we will take a note that how summit it was. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, who knew shared services had covered such a ground in our country? We will take a short break at this point, but do come back to listen into leading HR professionals talking about implementing shared services in their companies. Welcome back. You're watching the NHRD Summit on ET Now. Now, human resource management is one of the most important functions of an organization, and HR shared services can definitely aid for a more efficient running of any company. In the next panel, leading HR professionals from some of India's biggest companies share their experiences on collaborating with shared service providers. The HR functions are not just to address employee needs about salaries and leaves. Human resource management works like a cog that enables smooth functioning of the corporate machinery. Shared services as a concept to aid that effort was discussed in this panel titled Experience and Collaboration, with panelists emphasizing on the challenges that they faced while implementing the HR shared services model for their large companies.
When we implement shared services, there is service for all employees and there is a platinum service for seniors. And very often we find that seniors in the organizations might have a buy-in to a change management initiative, but, unlike leading from the top, are not willing to pick up the phone and talk to a shared service center. The call goes to somebody in HR. I'd love to hear about your experience on this as well.
The CEO and the leadership looks at overall cost and arbitrage, number one, because you have a terrific advantage through whatever processes you build. The HR fraternity looks at it, which has always been qualitative in nature, looks at process consistency and the HR employee experience bit of it. From an employee standpoint, it's purely what has changed for me. Is it turnaround time? Is it efficiency? Am I able to relate better? And aspects in terms of a final employee engagement aspect of it, which they can touch and feel. It's not what you measure, but which they possibly give more on the social platform rather than giving it internally through your engagement surveys. I guess those are some of the pulse that you can feel in terms of the organizational trajectory, and you can measure some of these aspects and bring the entire story together.
Just because somebody sitting at the top feels that, now the time is ripe to have a shared service, but this question is going to be asked by all stakeholders. And believe me, they are very, very relevant questions which they ask. Which are the areas where, collaboration plays a very, very important part? Now, the way we went about it, standardized all HR processes across AFS. 16 different locations, 9 businesses. It was a nightmare. It took us 5 to 6 months. A simple process like induction used to be carried out in 60 different ways in 16 different locations because every department had innovated its own induction process. So after standardization, it's centralization. And fine, it looks all good on papers, but at the end of the day, shared services is all about collaboration.
I don't think panelists are now debating whether there should be shared services. So I think the shift is now about how do you make shared services more effective? How do you give it a human face? How do you make sure that, the customer is, not left feeling like they're speaking to somebody who doesn't relate to them or doesn't empathize with them?
After an intense session, it was time to take the conversation forward. The second panel discussion of the day was titled Invigorating the Role of HR Business Partners Through Shared Services and Technology. Focusing on the symbiotic relationship between shared service providers, HR business partners and technology, the discussion tried to dissect how this can greatly aid the employee experience.
How are you able to actually break that behavior, and how all these three functions like COE, shared service and business partner can work collaboratively?
Believe me, first develop a norm in your company that it is important to rotate. In fact, I'm recommending to all of you that do not allow any one functionary to get into the other function without previous experience in one of them. So an HR partner should not be somebody who never had an experience in shared service. We should, first of all, collectively intermarry within the castes and develop a casteless society. And we should have the norm that it is okay to marry within the caste. So that's the only answer to this.
I think beyond, of course, the rotation, you got to put sometimes your best people in those, because sometimes roles are made by the people in them. It's a vicious cycle. If you pick the role and you put someone, you've got nothing else to do with or something, that is what the role will become, right? And that is the role of the HR business partner, the leader, to make those roles aspirational, move people around, right people, because it is such a fundamental lever of delivering the entire HR portfolio, right?
When at work as professionals, we are constantly looking at, okay, I'm in the COE, what's my COE core team looking like, what's my peer group like? And let's looking at the shared services and what's my peer group in that shared services like. I don't think I equate myself, irrespective of what the organization says, I think probably in my head I'm superior to this person in shared services. We got to break that barrier. And I think it's an incredibly important role that an HR leader needs to play to break that barrier, and the shared services lead needs to play to break that barrier. By renewing the talent and making it important that a management trainee from a B school, top-rated B school, comes and works in the shared services, and it's as important to work there as it is important to work elsewhere in the organization, in any other part of the HR function. So we got to break, these organizational barriers that are kind of created mostly through mindset barriers that we carry in our minds.
HR still, at the end of the day, in spite of its three constituents of HR partners, BPs as they call, the shared service providers, and the COEs, the centers of excellence, for the business client, there is only one HR. And our ability to come together is what will define the effectiveness of the HR function.
It's time for another short break, but on the other side, we have two more power-packed discussions on the role of HR shared services for companies. We will also give you a glimpse of the exhibition held to showcase the leading HR shared service providers in the country. Welcome back. We are showcasing the third NHRD Summit on ET Now. This year's theme was HR Shared Services and Technology. And the next panel discussion recounts individual experiences of senior HR professionals on taking their companies to newer heights. The third panel discussion of the day was held to highlight the individual paths that the Chief Human Resource Officers of the companies had to take to successfully implement shared services in India. Titled The Journey from Efficiency to Experience, panelists spoke about the challenges they faced, especially cultural, to execute the concept of shared services in HR in their turfs.
The question that I have to all three of you all is that, hindsight is 2020. You all have been through this journey, you've been through the ups and downs and all. When you look back, there's one thing that you'd say now, if I had the opportunity, I would not do, or I would do in this journey, what would that be?
I think if you want my answer, I'll refer back to slide. Probably, I don't think any one of us will have a choice to go back to the, let's say, the 7 years or 10 years back, direction. What we can do is, in fact, it's not a cast in stone. You can always balance it out, correct? Because this question versus the, human spurge versus e-spurge, correct? There's always the E today. And people appreciate that. But I think sometimes there are some issues where you also require the conversational, kind of offerings, which you also offer as a platform. And if people are aware of it, that you can actually go to human, QX than the e-spurge, I think they also appreciate that. So I don't think we will have to go back. We'll have to only go further because we are scaling up.
Okay, on a lighter note, if I were to go back in the time machine, I don't think I would have joined shared services. That's on a lighter note because it is quite stressful. It can be a very painful experience, but certainly, of course, as they say, you have to stand up to the challenge and run to it, on a lighter note. But on a serious note, my experience is that, we talk about when you're doing transitioning, the shift and lift or the lift and shift. So if I were to start all over again, I would rather do it in pilot phases with a few companies, few businesses, master it, and then go to the next phase rather than taking everything and trying to do it. And when you're trying to acquire, as I said, I would rather first standardize processes, standardize systems, harmonize all the compensation benefits, then bring them into the larger organization, which is called the shift and then the lift. We have been following in some cases the lift and then trying to do clean up and build on the fly. It's been a big challenge. So that is something I would have done differently.
I'll just answer this. What is it that we would like to do differently, and what has been our one singular key learning? The big ticket learning which we had is the employee engagement should have happened a little earlier. Because ultimately, if you look at it, HR shared services is all about targeting employees here, our internal employees. In this case, we had designed the value proposition. We started off by working on process structures. Then we worked on processes. And after that, we went down to employees, telling them, see, this is what we have, and this is what you need to do. So had we engaged them